adultery is extramarital sex that is considered objectionable on social, religious, moral, or legal grounds, although the sexual activities that constitute adultery vary, as well as the social, religious, and legal consequences. The concept exists in many cultures and is similar in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Adultery is viewed by many jurisdictions as offensive to public morals, being a mistreatment of the marriage relationship. Historically, many cultures considered adultery a very serious crime, some subject to severe punishment, usually for the woman and sometimes for the man, with penalties including capital punishment, mutilation, or torture. Such punishments have gradually fallen into disfavor, especially in Western countries from the 19th century. In countries where adultery is still a criminal offense, punishments range from fines to caning and even capital punishment. Since the 20th century, criminal laws against adultery have become controversial, with most Western countries decriminalizing adultery. However, even in jurisdictions that have decriminalized adultery, it may still have legal consequences, particularly in jurisdictions with fault-based divorce laws, where adultery almost always constitutes a ground for divorce and may be a factor in property settlement, the custody of children, the denial of alimony, etc. Adultery is not a ground for divorce in jurisdictions which have adopted a no-fault divorce model. International organizations have called for the decriminalization of adultery, especially in the light of several high-profile stoning cases that have occurred in some countries. The head of the United Nations expert body charged with identifying ways to eliminate laws that discriminate against women or are discriminatory to them in terms of implementation or impact, Kamala Chandra Kirna, has stated that adultery must not be classified as a criminal offense at all. A joint statement by the United Nations Working Group on Discrimination Against Women in Law and in Practice states that adultery as a criminal offense violates women's human rights. In Muslim countries that follow Sharia law for criminal justice, the punishment for adultery may be stoning. There are 15 countries in which stoning is authorized as lawful punishment, though in recent times it has been legally carried out only in Iran and Somalia. Most countries that criminalize adultery are those where the dominant religion is Islam, and several sub-Saharan African Christian majority countries. But there are some notable exceptions to this rule, namely Philippines and several US states. In some jurisdictions, having sexual relations with the king's wife or the wife of his eldest son constitutes treason. The term adultery refers to sexual acts between a married person and someone who is not that person's spouse. It may arise in a number of contexts. In criminal law, adultery was a criminal offense in many countries in the past, and is still a crime in some countries today. In family law, adultery may be a ground for divorce, with the legal definition of adultery being physical contact with an alien and unlawful organ. While in some countries today, adultery is not in itself grounds for divorce, extramarital sexual acts not fitting this definition are not adultery, though they may constitute unreasonable behavior, also a ground of divorce. Another issue is the issue of paternity of a child. The application of the term to the act appears to arise from the idea that criminal intercourse with a married woman tended to adulterate the issue of an innocent husband, and to expose him to support and provide for another man's. Thus, the purity of the children of a marriage is corrupted, and the inheritance is altered. Some adultery laws differentiate based on the sex of the participants, and as a result such laws are often seen as discriminatory, and in some jurisdictions they have been struck down by courts, usually on the basis that they discriminated against women. The term adultery, rather than extramarital sex, implies a moral condemnation of the act. As such, it is usually not a neutral term because it carries an implied judgment that the act is wrong. Adultery refers to sexual relations which are not officially legitimized. For example, it does not refer to having sexual intercourse with multiple partners in the case of polygamy. In archaic law, there was a common law taught of criminal conversation arising from adultery. Conversation being an archaic euphemism for sexual intercourse. It was a tort action brought by a husband against a third party who interfered with the marriage relationship. This tort has been abolished in almost all jurisdictions, but continues to apply. For example, in some states in the United States, most notably in North Carolina, marital infidelity has been used, especially in the past, as a legal defense of provocation to a criminal charge, such as murder or assault. In